Welcome, Brittany. I am so happy to have the Dopamine Queen on Home Therapy Podcast. When I first met you in Washington, D.C., you already know this, but I was fangirling because my sister and I have been following you forever, as you know. And my book is actually back in Seattle. I bought your book, when it came out. And so I don't have it with me right now, but I do just know how much joy you bring to all of us. The use of patterns and colors, like hello, and even your fits, like every day I was like, oh my God, that's so Brittany. Whatever you wore, I'm just like, that's so Brittany.
Oh, you're
Um,
so kind. Thank you, Anita. That's very kind of you to say.
so I'm glad that now we get to talk about more of how you are as a creative and where it all began. I'm gonna just dive into your childhood because I guess since when you were 10, you started a crafting club. Can you share a little bit more of how that started?
I did. So my mom is really creative. She had like a creative career and she always had an emphasis on like thinking outside the box, even when we were kids. So we would maybe make a project or something, and she would always say, well, how can we make it? How can we take it to the next level? So, I mean, that was a part of like even school book reports, or I remember we had to, in California, you have to do like a section on the gold rush. And like, I made a gold rush man doll, and there's just like crazy things. I didn't have to do any of that, but she always encouraged me like, oh, well, you could make that, like, so I made little clothes for the little doll. I mean, everyone else came with like a drawing, so it was always, how can I make it? What else can I do to make it interesting and thought provoking? And she wasn't necessarily using those words, but that's how I see it now. Like, oh, you have this, but what else can we do to make it so much, to use your skills and to practice things? So yeah, when I was 10, I started a club, a very creative name called Crafts for Holidays. And like we would get together, I would force my friends who weren't necessarily crafty to come over, and we would make something for Halloween, we'd make something for Thanksgiving, Christmas, every single holiday we would have something to make. And in hindsight, I'm realizing I patterned it after my mom, and some of the things and get-togethers I would see her do. They would get together and make things. So I had crafts for holidays, and it's not much different than what I do today.
I was just going to say immediately, I'm thinking of all the blog posts, that you have seasonally. And uh, does she still craft with you these days, or is she still being creative in her own way? And how does that influence you and your boys? Like, does she craft with her grandsons? How does her creativity influence you and your family now?
I think a lot of it is I'm not sure I necessarily see her crafting as much anymore, so much as there's always the thought like I'll share an idea with her and she'll share how to make it better, how to improve it, or she'll send me a lot of ideas like, oh, look at this idea, you could do this to it, or you could do this to it. So it's um more like a creative brainstorm all the time, like our text threads. Even yesterday, for example, I'm going to share this with you. So I have this lamp right here. This was my grandmother's lamp.
Oh, that's amazing. So for listeners who can't see it visually, can you describe just briefly what it
Yes,
looks like?
I'm so sorry. I totally forgot that people
It's
are.
okay.
So it's like this Asian inspired lamp, and it's in like lavender and periwinkles, and I think they would call it like a chinoiserie
It's
type
beautiful.
illustration on this ceramic lamp, and it's probably from the 50s or 60s, I would say. And my mom gave them to me, and there were no lampshades, and so I've been trying to figure out lampshades. And I don't have a lot of time, so I just like got something from Target, and I get a text from her because I shared it on Instagram. She's like, "Ooh, have you thought about a lampshade that's a little more interesting that would maybe look like this. And I was like, absolutely not. I have not thought about that. I just needed a lampshade. And so she's like, well, you could draw it out. And so yesterday she sent me a sketch of what the size and scale could be. And I was like, great. Can you go find this for me?
I just love that. She is your creative art director, like your idea person. And how wonderful is that? I liken my sister. She's in graphic design and well, she's a real estate broker now, but she wanted to go to art school and she was an English major and art major, but she to this day influences me in similar ways. So I love how she is continuing to shape your creative, ideas and contribute to this wonderful idea of color and form and shape. And I also know that you went to the reason why you were so familiar Washington, D.C., because I remember you went out to dinner. I'm just like, oh my God, she's walking her outside by herself at night. And you were like, I got this. This is my city. But I know you went to school in Washington, D.C., and then later worked at so many wonderful places, like even with Jonathan Adler, which actually doesn't surprise me because I feel like his bold colors and patterns are very in similar veins of how you create. But I was just dying, like, what was that experience like working with so many great creative people in that era?
Well, it was an interesting era. So the reason I lived in Washington, D.C. is because I went to graduate school there. I got a graduate degree in interior design. And this was like from 2007 to 10. And it was at a time when blogs were starting to come out. And I was growing up, I was always really into magazines, like interior design magazines, like anything I could get my hands on. And that's kind of how you shaped your aesthetic at the time, was through books and magazines. And after I graduated, I worked, no. Before I went to school, I worked for a large hotel chain doing interior design. And this hotel chain is not necessarily known for their design aesthetics so much as like comfort and just being like really solid. And I remember I was just fresh out of college and was starting to really put together my aesthetic. And I was looking at blogs while I was at work because I needed to collect inspiration for these designers who I was mostly just assisting. And, it was like Design Sponge. Oh, Design Sponge. It was just like being introduced to the things that really kind of shaped our generation, I guess. And I remember stumbling across Jonathan Adler on his website, and I was blown away. I had never seen anything like it. Even in my interior design magazines, I'd never seen anything like it. His humor, his irreverence, his use of ceramics, but also transforming them into interiors was very new to me. And I was like a hawk. Like I was so laser focused. Like, what is this place? And I realized, oh, you can be fun and you don't have to take yourself seriously, but it can also be beautiful. And I kept that with me for a while until I was in grad school and I was looking for internships. And so during spring break, while everyone was gone, I was in the computer lab. I spent the whole week in the computer lab researching where I wanted to intern and then sending out applications. I sent out like over 50 applications all across the United States. One of them was to Jonathan Adler, and one of them was to Celery Kemble, who is an interior designer in New York, who is like Palm Springs aesthetic, but really great use of patterns and materials and colors, like a refreshing color, like almost beachy color palette. And so I sent them there, and they were the only two that I heard back from, but I got them. And so I said yes to both. And then I worked 3 days at one and 2 days at the other. But they were so instrumental in shaping my view of what interior design is as a profession, but also how to create two entirely different aesthetics. And also, what is my aesthetic in all this madness. So it was so foundational for me. And I kind of took bits and pieces of both aesthetics and grew upon the one that I identified growing up, which is more like in my roots and my mom's aesthetic. And so it's like this whole mesh of a bunch of aesthetics, and it was so impressionable to me. So I really value that training I got.
I definitely see, different inspiration from, these really pivotal people in your life. Even the wall that behind you, there's pattern on pattern. And something that I really admire what you do is you're able to layer patterns and colors and shapes and forms and have it be so cohesive. I know there's going to be listeners that are going to be like, I love it so much, but how do I do that at home? Do you have a few pieces of advice that how do we start in even like I love when there's two contrasting wallpapers in a room, but sometimes I just get a little overwhelmed and I spend hours. I just can't, it doesn't come super natural to me, even though I love it. And I know a lot of people might feel the same way. So, do you have advice on how we can layer things that are cohesive and not have it look chaotic?
Yeah, I will say it's tricky. And I understand why people shy away from it. I get it. It can be really tricky to pair things. And even me, like it's like sometimes I just go for it because I don't care, like, oh, if this doesn't work, I'll try something else. And I think sometimes it's practicing, but I think becoming conversant in the language of design is important for knowing how to implement it better. So even when you see something that you like, telling yourself or asking yourself, why do I like that? Or learning the design principles. Your book does a great job of laying out some of those principles. And so, like, really becoming conversant, like, oh, I like that because I like the colors. Oh, I like that because of the scale. I like that because of the negative space. So once you like can really become conversant in it, then I think it's really then you can like start putting the puzzle pieces together. So for example, this wallpaper that you see here, it's one from our wallpaper collection. It's like zinnias, and they're pretty, I mean, they take up the whole pattern. Like there's not too much negative space here. But because of that, I kind of consider it as solid, if that makes sense. Like
Yeah.
there's a little bit of white space, but because of that, I have a flower print that has a lot of negative space, and you can read it better because the wallpaper is so covered with florals. So it pops. Otherwise, there's some florals where it may not work because maybe the florals are on the same scale as this print, or and you can't have scales that are the same, otherwise one of them will not read well. But the flowers are just small enough that they I think they work.
Oh, they absolutely work. And it's like the smaller print becomes the background, and then you find something bolder or more prominent as the foreground. So I really love how you're pointing that out. And it's very similar to having two rugs in the same room. Those living room, dining room combination rooms. A lot of times I'll put a rug in the dining room and the living room, but it's kind of similar where like one could have a smaller print, and then the other maybe a bolder pattern. But so basically, balance is what you're saying. And also, something I'm taking away from you is not overthinking, like the experimenting part as a creative. Would you say a lot of times you have your foundational ideas, but at the end of the day, is it just letting loose and being creative and seeing what sticks?
Oh, absolutely. And I think that's where a lot of us get stuck is we don't maybe have the guts to try it, or we think, oh, that's not me. And you know what? I kind of think it is you more than you think. But I think we've also been trained to think, oh, I need to have neutrals, and this is like, I need to follow this person's aesthetic rather than tapping into what's inside your heart. And that's where I really feel like super strong about. I feel like we don't give ourselves enough credit as to what we really truly love. And going back to that, before I heard of Marie Kondo, I always said you need to find things that make your heart jump. And hers, of course, is things that's what is
Spark
it?
joy.
Spark joy. So all of those things. But when I see something and it like makes my heart jump, then I know like that is me. And I feel like people might feel that, but they don't think they're supposed to feel that. And so I feel like that living for other people, it's it's so hard to live in that space where you're living for other people. And I feel like this will be a muscle that you have to exercise that, oh, no, 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 I like this. I don't, and you kind of have to say, I don't care what you say. I know it's not your aesthetic and I know you might judge it, but I love this. It's so hard to do, especially when you've spent your whole life trying to fit into a box that you think you're supposed to be in. But who says you have to fit into that box? Like, I don't expect you to have the same aesthetic as me, and I don't, and so on and so forth. So, yeah, I think experimenting is a big part of it, but I know that also can be expensive, So like, yeah, this wallpaper doesn't work, and that's a big expense. And so I realize and I understand why it's hard.
Yeah. Sustainability too, you don't want to be overconsumption and things like that. I think it's really just finding your smaller areas of experimenting, so instead of like thinking all or nothing, as a therapist, I'm always thinking of cognitive behavioral therapy, but like all or nothing thinking, limiting beliefs, negative beliefs about ourselves in our home. Everything you've just spoken about made my heart sing, because that's really what we want to use our home for. Like when I see your home, my dopamine level is like, I can't tell you, Brittany, I get so many hits when I go on your Instagram or go on your blog because I love that color. I love that pattern. Now, I'm going to be honest, I'm a little more intimidated to do it all, but I have to say, you're going to be proud of me. This year is my year to really go all out on it. And I love your feedback. But yes, like you are to me a dopamine decor expert. And I'm just curious, what is your favorite color? Or do you have several? But what, when you say what makes you happy, are there colors or patterns that you just time and time again go back to?
Oh, absolutely. And I do have to say, I don't think I'm choosing and gravitating towards things because they're like, oh, that color is known for happiness, so therefore I love it.
No,
Or
it's just you. It's
it's
just
just like I'm naturally drawn. I love yellow. I love pink. I love red. I love green. I'd say I'm mostly attracted, and I have been for a while, to yellow, which is naturally known as a color of happiness, the color of the sun, the color of bright flowers. But for some, like I see it and my brain goes to, oh, I could pair that with this. I love the pairing of colors. I love the story that pairing colors create. So I love a yellow. I love a yellow with a brown,
Oh, that's
which
interesting.
yeah. So I always love like a bright color with like I call it a grounding color. So yellow with a brown or a pink, even a pink with a brown is so like, or like a neutral, like I think of this beautiful rattan color, like a lovely, I like bright colors with groundings. Yellow, and just like, how can the I guess the unknown of pairing these colors is also very exciting. And finding a color combination that works is like mind blowing to me.
I'm just curious, what sign are you?
A
Astrology sign.
Gemini.
Okay, that's awesome. And so do you find, because I just love talking astrology. So, you know, I'm trying to think Geminis. Tell me, do you see some of your Gemini coming out in your work?
I don't know too much about astrology other than like what I see when I'm scrolling through Instagram. Oh, Geminis are like this. I know it's the twins, and I'm guessing because I don't know too much, it's like a pull of two
Yeah,
different.
like those two sides of your personality, and I'll have to it's you would think I would know it by heart, but yeah, it's just I was just curious because that's just always a fun question to ask.
Well, yeah, but I think in that way, now
Well, I
that I'm
guess
thinking about it
yeah.
more, I am totally a Gemini because on one hand, I have the House That Lars Built is my company, and that is like super bright, and probably brighter and more playful than what I do in not real life, but like as a person. So, and I think of my house. So the basement of my house, I'm in my basement right now where my offices are. And so this is my brand, my business down here, but upstairs, I don't have the same level of saturated colors. I like to bring in more of those grounding colors or even a color. Let's say it's a green. I have a green refrigerator that I kind of desaturated. So I like colors that are more desaturated and not as bright. So I think I don't know. My therapist told me I live with a lot of cognitive dissonance.
And
So
I think like Gemini's, again, it's like the push pull, the tension, and this is just a gut feeling, but I have a feeling you're an introvert. Are you an introvert?
yeah, I'm an extroverted introvert.
Yes, like I mean, ambivert maybe, but I feel like this is just me. My therapist is talking. But like
I
I
love
feel like you find yourself grounded when you tap into that introvert. You get your rest from being by yourself. Like you find that
Yes.
grounding.
Even just hearing that makes me so peaceful.
Yes.
So I know, like, I actually don't mind. I love being with people.
Yeah.
I think I love being
Social
social.
and
I love going to events. I love going to parties. Like I'm the last person to leave a party. I just love being social. But I could be by myself for months and days and just like doing my own thing because I just love doing my own thing. I have so much I could be doing. Like there's endless amounts of things like I could create or I could do this. And if I could just be locked in a hotel room, I just figured out that's like my dream.
I love that so much. I'm more of an extrovert, but as I'm getting older, I'm an ambivert. Okay. So, anyways, I always like talking about that because it's fun to see how different creatives have different personalities. It's just how it influences our time at home because I think as creatives, we to gain inspiration, we need those moments of pause as well and how we soak in inspiration, how we marinate on things. And I'm just so excited to talk to you about all these things. Now, I'm just curious with two young boys and as a businesswoman, a entrepreneur, I'm always so excited to pick your, different people's brains about that didn't sound right, but I just really would love to know how you juggle everything because I call them buckets and I know you have many buckets. How do you manage the mommy world, the business world, and just time management and stay sane?
Well, I don't think I am staying sane. I think sometimes I feel like my brain is like literally splitting into many parts like, oh, mom, oh, business, oh, this. It's like, oh my gosh, how do I do this all at the same time? I feel like I'm trying to take steps to implement more systems into my life. I think naturally I'm not drawn to systems. So I feel like especially with children, like there's a lot of chaos in my life. And I think my boys are particularly chaotic. Like I have two boys, but I look at people who have lots of kids and I'm like, I feel like that's what it's like to have many children. Like they're just chaos. They're absolute chaos.
They're
And
energetic.
they're energetic, but also independent. So they get into a lot of mischief because they're 5 and 2 and 5 and 3, and they don't like know how to actually do things. For example, the other day, during Christmas break, I took it off. And I was like, we have a shop. And so I was like, oh my gosh, I can't go another day without fulfilling these orders. But my Jenny, who works for me, she usually does them. And I was like, I think I have to do it. There's not enough time. So I was like, I'm not going to tell my boys. I'm going to go downstairs. I'm going to fulfill these orders. I'm going to risk it. Because if I tell them, they're going to try and find me. Game over. I won't be able to do it. So it takes me like a half hour to fulfill these orders. And in the meantime, I'm so proud of myself because I was like, I got this done. And I come upstairs with my bags with orders, and in comes my neighbor with my son Felix. And she said, oh, I found Felix down on the road. And I was like, oh, the doors were locked. Like I have four locks, and he's my 3-year-old. And then Jasper was up in my room. He's not supposed to be on the TV, and he was watching TV, and he had bottles and buckets around him so he wouldn't have to go to the bathroom while he was watching TV.
He has foresight.
They were filled with pee, but also pee on the ground, like all around. And I was like, this is a half hour. I risked it and I lost. It's just like life is chaotic.
Well, I have much older children than you, and they're girls. My sister has two boys, and I think I mentioned this to you before, but she looks so tired every day. And I'm tired, okay? But she looks really tired every day. And I have three girls, so I'm like, just have a third, just have a third. Then we'll have three boys on one side, three girls on the other. And she goes, no, like, and you're in that season, 5 and 3, 4 and 6, those 8, that is, you are in the trenches, girl. So I feel you, and I don't think it's anything. I think we all have been through those seasons, but that is quite an adventure you probably experience every day.
Every day. Yeah. And a part of it is, I always thought that I would have kids who I was like, oh, I'm going to craft with them. I'm going to share my artistic wisdom, my creativity with them. And to be honest, so far, they don't care at all. So I'll say, hey, should we color? Should we go make a craft? And my oldest has no interest in it. He thinks that like all the stuff he does at school, like, Mom, I already did it. I'm good. And he went to an artsy fartsy preschool, and he's like, Mom, I already know how to draw. Mom, I already know how to do this. I'm like, oh, forgive me. Like, no, you don't need any more. So I feel like my dreams aren't necessarily coming true. Maybe they will someday. Maybe they're still too young. I don't know.
I think they're just young and they change so much. But yeah, just to give you an idea, I have so much therapeutic experience, and especially teen girls. That was my niche, like I love helping young women become who they are. And so I have three girls, and, especially my two teenagers, I'll want to chit chat with them, or I'll want to impart some advice about maybe boys or self-care. And they're like, no, like, just don't even breathe. Just don't even, like, I walk down the stairs and the eye rolls begin. And I'm like, I didn't even talk to you. I haven't even talked. Like, what is, so there's many, I think parenting is just, it's all relative in the different seasons. But I just really admire how in the midst of everything, you are just doing amazing work. And I wanted to let you know that you inspire so many people just like me every day. So
Anita, that's so kind of you.
oh gosh, I mean it. I totally mean it. So I thought maybe we would just end with, let's see, I have one more question, which is, I don't know. Do you have a question for me?
Oh, I would love to know how your podcast is going.
You know what? I am having so much fun. It is, as you know, as a creative, we're not necessarily the best. This is a generalization. I'm just going to talk about myself. I am a total creative when it comes to like time management, maybe finances, like the very nitty gritty stuff. I'm not the best at, but of course, with my creative vision and things, I'm very perfectionistic, right? You just want things, it just has to hit right for me. But with a podcast, what I love is that it's not necessarily a visual mode, right? But I've decided that I love the experience of talking with other creatives or interesting people because you learn so much from 30 minutes. And I crave that interaction and that interface. So I'm enjoying it immensely. It's just been so fun.
How many interviews have you done so far?
So far, 5.
Oh, very cool. Well, I
Mhm.
think it's such a great niche because the home interior design, it really is so focused on your well-being. And I think that's something that a lot of we don't give enough credit to, like the things you surround, and I always say this, like the things you surround yourself have so much impact on how you feel. And going back to what we were talking about earlier about how you have to live with, I think you should live with things that really like make your heart jump. And if you don't, like, I just feel like you're not being your true authentic self. You're just living for somebody else. And what if you were in like lived in a place where you were inspired by, I feel like things have a life in them. Not to get too kumbaya, but like I feel like everything that you bring into your home that you relate to, that sparks that joy, has life in it. And if you bring all that life into your surroundings, you will be inspired. You will live better. And part of our mission at what we do is the House That Lars Built is to encourage people to make things with your hands, because when you make things with your hands, you live a deeper life. Like there's like soul in making things, but I think there's also soul in things and in things that inspire you. And things can be cold if they don't mean something to you. Things can be sterile if they don't mean things to you. So I think filling your home, your life, your surroundings with things that mean something to you is so important. And I really think that you're doing like such a great work in encouraging people to tap into their brains and tap into their hearts with design. I think it's such a lovely thing.
Thank you so much. That means so much to me that it's coming from you. I This is a dream come true, and honestly, I know being a therapist for 20 years was not a waste. There was at some point I'm like, was it a waste, And I'm so glad I hung on to my license. There's just a purpose and intention for everything. And how I love piggybacking what you're saying is it's just that energy, being intentional in our own homes in our way, in our authentic way. And there's a vulnerability to that. And so being willing to be vulnerable and succumbing to that vulnerability, I think that's where true creativity is born. So thank you for being on with me. This was so lovely. I hope you can come back someday and we can talk more.
Absolutely. I would love to talk more. Like this is such a passion of mine to talk about these things. So I feel very honored to be one of your first guests. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much.